Hi, my name is Tyler Bisbee. This is Kinesiology 473. And today I'll be talking about my capstone presentation, which is going to be high intensity interval training versus low intensity interval training in creating muscular hypertrophy in adolescent athletes. Little background, sports are an important part of my life and of many of the lives of adolescents. Me, myself, I have a 13-year-old son who is interested in getting into sports now. And so it kind of begged the question, what can I do to help prepare him for sports in the future? And he's a lot like the way I was as a teenager. He's kind of lanky, a little bit taller, super skinny. And so I've been wondering, what can I do to help gain some muscle mass or some hypertrophy to the muscles on his body? And so that helped me get to where we are with this research question. So here we're talking about creating an appropriate exercise prescription, which is critical for adolescents to progress towards their maximum potential. And so the way I'm looking at it is I'm looking at catching teenagers around 13 years old that are getting ready to transition from middle school to high school and preparing to go into high school sports. Football is kind of the main sport that I'm looking at. And then understanding appropriate exercise prescriptions can lead to the future prevention of athletic and workout injuries. So it's also important to know with background that we want to help beef these kids up, get them strong, let them get techniques and fundamentals learned in the weight room that they can take out to the field, put on muscle mass that is going to help prevent injuries out on the field, and also by learning proper fundamentals and proper workout procedures, they're able to come into the weight room and also hopefully help prevent injuries while they're working out. All right, so the importance behind this research question is there's not a lot of information out there on adolescent weightlifting and building muscle up in these teenagers. And so for me, it kind of is eye-opening. We need to get more research out there because there's still debates going on whether or not children and youths and adolescents should be in the weight room or not. And I believe that it's an important part of sports, and I think it's important also to help build the muscle growth. And so while we're looking at that research, it's interesting seeing that there's not a lot out there and there's a lot of conflicting information. So my goal is to get our question out there, get the research kind of done, do the research and get the statistics for it, and hopefully it'll help create questions for more researchers in the future. So as we're investigating appropriate strength training programs necessary for two reasons. It will better determine whether low or high intensity exercise regimens are more beneficial for increasing adolescent muscular hypertrophy, which will lead and help coaches, mentors, parents, etc. develop appropriate strength training programs. It will also provide evidence of the influence of the fit principle intensity of hypertrophy, since there is a significant gap of information in current literature. So I think it's important to get this question out here and see if there's some good solid information that we could use to help prove our point. So as we look at our problem statement, research question here is going to be, would a low intensity interval training program as opposed to high intensity interval training program produce significant muscular hypertrophy of the arms and thighs in a 13-year-old adolescent male over the course of a 6-week training regimen? So my hypothesis in this whole thing after doing the research and coming up with a educated guess is, when we're using high-intensity interval training, we are going to see more of a production of hypertrophy in the muscles, especially when we're focusing on strength and power training compared to power and strength training in low-intensity interval training. All right, so we're looking at methods in our overview of intervention, and we're looking at 20 teenagers. The goal was to take these teenagers at 13 years old, transitioning from middle school 8th grade into 9th grade, and kind of catch them at the middle school in the summertime so that we can kind of transition them into the football program for freshman football. And so the goal was to get 20 13-year-old athletes, and then what we wanted to do is separate them into two groups of 10 randomly so that there is no cherry picking one team versus another team or something like that. So these were grouped into random groups called Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 was assigned to low intensity interval training, while Group 2 was assigned to high intensity interval training. Our independent variables are the adolescent males and the initial measurements of the athlete's arms and thighs. So our goal was to use a Gulick tape, get out there, measure them, see what we're looking at, And then our dependent variables would be the muscular growth of the participants and the assigned program in which they were using. And then our instruments were the Gulick tape to measure the use, which was used to collect the measurements. An retest method was used to collect and record data, and data was analyzed using Microsoft Excel. So it was important to understand that we did want to take these measurements from week to week at the end of each week and just kind of gather our statistics on how the growth was looking between the two groups through all 6 weeks. We also were able to not only use the Gulick tape, but also use one repetition max for just a variety of tests, so that we can see what their strength and their power is looking like using those kind of tests as well. All right, so data was collected each week, and the data was analyzed using a t-test for 2 paired sample means. The test data analyzed was the beginning measurements against final measurements. And so we kind of have our numbers here. You can kind of see our t-test, going through our statistics, looking how each one of these stats came back when we were able to test these kids based off their height, their weight, their age, and then of course their BMI played into it. And then we were able to start with their beginning arm circumference as well as their final arm circumference, which gave us our difference. And then we were able to look at our standard deviation and some of the minimums and maximums here, as well as our mean values, which gave us values that showed that the HIIT, or the high intensity interval training, did show a little more growth than the LIT, or low intensity interval training. So our findings: adolescents who participated in the HIIT showed significantly more growth during testing than those who participated in the LIT, or the low intensity interval training, which indicates that the high intensity interval training program is more effective at increasing muscular hypertrophy in adolescent males. So for us, this was super important to be able to find these findings and to understand how we can implement this workout routine or prescription for future 9th graders coming in and starting to play football, so that we can again learn fundamentals, learn the best way to work out, and then be able to carry that throughout their football career in high school and then possibly into college. So discussion, future research, and conclusions. The research results and findings of the study suggest strongly that when designing a strength training regimen for adolescent athletes, a high-intensity interval training program will be more effective in producing muscular hypertrophy than low-intensity interval training. Though there are very little literature, raising awareness of the idea may inspire other researchers to conduct their own experiments, which can broaden the amount of information available. Additionally, to address limitations, the experiment should be repeated with a systematic assigning of participants to each group to ensure that the results are still consistent with the original findings. So my goal is, I hope that this kind of research question will get other coaches or mentors or parents into the idea of what can I do to help prepare my kids for high school sports, especially when they start getting to 12, 13 years old, because it's what they're learning young that's going to help carry through into adulthood. And again, if we can get on top of not only just producing hypertrophy in the muscles, but also being able to get these kids into good workout habits, good nutritional habits, we can make that a lifelong, just a lifelong type of activity that they'll do for the rest of their lives. And we know that in this day and age, it's super important for kids to get out there and exercise so that they can stay healthy into adulthood and hopefully live longer, more positive lives in the future. So with that, that leaves me to my conclusion. I appreciate everything that we've done this semester. I hope that this PowerPoint was beneficial. I hope that the paper shows some kind of research that is beneficial to the world of research and kinesiology. And again, if there's any questions or concerns, please reach out to me, email me, call me, anything like that. I'm willing to listen, learn. I'm always open to taking constructive criticism, and I really appreciate all the time and effort that we put into this class. God bless everybody, and have a happy holidays and Merry Christmas.